Oh, you're muted. Let me just draw the curtain behind.
Yes. Okay.
Maybe if that is it better. Yeah, it's a bit better.
I think we shall give it like 3 more minutes, then we get started with the conversation. Yes, so that we can kick off the meeting as we wait more participants, see more people on the venue. Okay.
Hi, Christian.
Hi.
I notice no one is telling you hello.
Oh, that's fine. It's good. Sometimes you see more note takers than, well, there can be as many note takers as participants.
Okay, how are you doing?
Good, good, good. You know, since I got the invitation last week, I haven't really thought about it. It was at the back of my mind. And I
Okay.
thought, am I going to repeat things, or am I just trying to maybe repeat some things, but then try to take the discussion forward on other issues? So let's see.
Yes, so we definitely know that even if not prepared, you are always having the stuff ready.
Yeah, sometimes it's too much to try to put it on paper or in slides.
I know.
I'm sitting in Mauritius now, and we're supposed to be, there's a cyclone that is supposed to be coming closer to us as from tonight. So hopefully the internet will not go down or electricity will not go off. Actually, I should.
We shall pray for that. I
Yeah.
know there are many intercessors in the room.
Yeah, but the thing is that, like somebody said, the contradiction is that we are having a drought year, so we need some
Yeah.
rain, but we don't
Yes.
need the damage that comes with the cyclone. So if you can bring the rain without the winds, then we'll be well off. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
great.
Hi, Derek.
Hi, how are you?
Very good.
I think we can
Yeah.
start and then we'll see how it goes in terms of
Yeah.
discussions later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think seeing most of the people are joining right now. So we are good to start and they will find us going by. So thank you everyone for joining. My name is Derek Gige. I'm the technical lead at Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition, standing in for the Africa and the Europe continents. I'm joined with the president of the organization, Dr. Kiringai Kamau, who will just give us more chance to introduce himself, and then we can go straight ahead. I'm also joined by my colleague Abhinav Dey, will introduce later after the talk during the conversations. Thank you very much. Dr. Kiringai, please, you can introduce yourself as you introduce the speaker of us today to begin the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For some strange reason, my camera is not opening up. So you will allow me to introduce without the camera on. So my name is Kiringai. I am the global lead for GODAN, the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition. We are based in Kenya. We moved the office from Montreal this year after the operations in Montreal proved inoperable. So I was tasked with the responsibility of leading the agenda on global open data for agriculture and nutrition to address matters evidence in sustainable development. And one of the most beneficial things about this is evidence is captured when you actually engage the right people. And the youth is an important cohort that we need to engage in that journey. And in the passage of time, when I was learning more about open data manenos, or issues to do with open data, I happened to have traveled to the organization that sponsored our office to kick off the open data initiative at the University of Nairobi, and I met Christian. Christian is a seasoned knowledge management expert and an open data specialist. He is one among the few people who actually captured open data and were very involved in pushing the open data initiatives when the Global Open Data for Agriculture and Nutrition was created. Then the office was in London, but they were in The Hague, and I met him there, and we developed a rapport that was in 2016, and we have remained friends ever since. I have watched him guide people who have been successful, and I knew that when the time comes, he is the person I would actually want to have very close to me. So it is a great privilege and pleasure today as we kick off the GODAN initiatives that we are now pushing. Every month, we will be having some discussion, presenting a case associated with food and nutrition, or agriculture and nutrition, or education and nutrition. But today, we are talking about data and the youth. And we want to welcome Christian, who will introduce himself more. As he has said, he is fearing there is a cyclone. So we want to make sure that in Mauritius, so we want to make sure that he finishes his discussion as fast as possible so that the evening doesn't find him at a point when he is in a precarious location. Thank you very much and welcome, Christian. And my pleasure always to welcome you to events like this. Karibu.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kiringai. And I guess, well, I'm seeing a few names here. Some people I have met 10 years ago. Some people I recognize their names from discussion forums here and there. So again, people, I won't mention them, but they know who they are. And I also see a lot of new names here. Yeah, so I've been invited to talk on this topic where Kiringai introduced me as an expert on open data. I wouldn't say I'm an expert on open data. I'm still learning, and I think that will be my approach in this session, that I'm going to share some of my thoughts, some of the questions I still have within my mind on the whole approach to open data, and then also what's happening today and where can we go from here together. So if you're expecting answers to the role of youth today, maybe we'll be co-learning about, and you can. I'm hoping I can learn more from you. So while I'm presenting, I would encourage you to put in as much as you want in the chat as well. I know Derek and I don't know whether Abhinav is supposed to be maybe doing the wrapping up, the moderator later on, but by all means, let's have as much discussion and ideas that come to your mind as I'm talking in the chat, because this is what will remain later on, and we can use that to discuss further. As Kiringai mentioned, it's meant to be more of a discussion session that happens, and hopefully we can build on it as we go forward. So let me see if I can share my screen. Oops, no, you need to enable me to do that.
Okay, let me do that.
Yeah. And yeah, so I just finished putting the slides together, and I just thought, okay, I have so much I would like to talk about. I thought I'll just give a few. All right. This one. Okay. Are you seeing my full screen?
Yes, I can see your full screen.
Okay. All right. So okay, this was the title, Role of Youth in Open Data Management. And I thought, no, obviously I asked the question to ChatGPT. What should I present if I was doing this? And I thought, okay, there's so many things that if you really wanted to know, you could ask ChatGPT, but it suggested I should have a kind of a subtitle. And I thought, okay, but I adapted it a bit. I said, okay, it's all about co-learning in and engaging with innovation, advocacy, transformation, and knowledge exchange. And you'll notice that I haven't used data in there, because I see data as the raw materials that we'll use in these processes that help us to innovate, to advocate, to transform, and to share knowledge. Now, some of you may not know me, but I was just thinking this morning that this year, it's going to be 30 years since I first saw the first time I saw a URL in an email. It was sent to me by a librarian in the US saying, oh, if you want to access this document, you can find it here. And I didn't know what to do with this thing that was in blue. I'm not sure whether it was in blue, but it said HTTP something university. And it's only 3 or 4 months later that actually I'm one of the lucky ones who got to go to a course where I was learning all about the web, about the setting up a web server and so on. And I was one of those who came back to my country 1 month after we introduced access to the web in the country. I was able to come back to the university, and I got people in the Faculty of Agriculture to start creating a web page for the faculty locally on our computers, because we still didn't have access to the internet. But I said, well, the day we have access to the internet, we'll be able to put up a page about the University of Mauritius and the Faculty of Agriculture and all the things we did. So yeah, so that's 30 years. And those who are, younger than 30 years, you'll know that you have lived your whole life with the web being present. And I've also got a list of different icons and logos at the bottom there. So I've come with experience, having got involved, worked at some of these organizations, but involved with several of them. You know, CT in the Netherlands, where Kieran mentioned we met and we started engaging our discussions. GFAIR was GFAR before, but I was GFAIR, looking at agricultural research and innovation. The FAO in terms of all the what you call it, the normative role of FAO in terms of setting standards for data exchange for quite a few initiatives. The Commonwealth, with whom I'm working at the moment on a concept of a national agricultural data infrastructure. At the bottom are the African organizations that I've been working with. So you have the research, extension, and the farm organizations. But to the right, to the far right, is something that you may not have seen. It's called CIARD. And that was one of the organizations that was the precursor to GODAN. And CIARD stands for Coherence in Information for Agricultural Research for Development. And I've got it on the next slide, but I wanted to give it its due credit, that it was an initiative that was started. At that time, I was working in the Southern African Development Community, and I was one of those, you know, sub-regional organizations looking at trying to coordinate agricultural research, knowledge exchange, information exchange. Actually, we were not talking about knowledge in those days. It was about communications and information management. We were not talking about knowledge management yet, but it was all about, you know, the big boys. So GFAR representing the NAS organizations, FAO and the CG system working together around this network we were referring to as CIARD, that was looking at, you know, becoming more coherent in the way we put information together. And the second bullet here talks about, you know, the way we were talking about finding out about resources and sharing knowledge. So trying to set up a platform where people could register their services or the data sets. And we're still doing this nowadays, to be able to then just discover and find data that is accessible. But the CIARD sort of lasted till about 2011, at which point there was a kind of an evolution into what became GODAN. But I also was looking at, you know, the coincidence that the Open Data Institute, and again, let me just mention that the Open Data Institute was initiated by Tim Berners-Lee, the same person who started off the whole web protocol and so on. So again, that he set up the Open Data Institute in 2012, and, you know, the definition of open data being that data that anyone can access, use, or share. And data is freely available to everyone without any restrictions on its use or distribution. And I think this is still one of the elements I'm kind of questioning myself about. What do we mean by open data? Is it free? You know, what does free mean? And that's something I would like to discuss a bit further. But then, you know, so maybe it was the convergence of these that happened to enable the establishment of GODAN as an initiative that, you know, started back in 2012. It got the recognition from two main sponsors were the British and American governments that wanted to fund these initiatives around open data in agriculture. And it made sense to talk about agriculture and nutritional data, because then it was related to a more, let's say, a more societal purpose of not just producing food, but ensuring nutrition and so on. So that was kind of the background to the creation of GODAN. And I've put on the title, you know, definition, and then I've got the nebulous interpretations, because again, it's the same thing with open access, where people who were, when I was first exposed to this, I said, well, what is, you know, why is it so binary that it is either open or it is not open? Isn't there a way to reach halfway there? Is there a pathway towards being open, and why don't you talk about opening access rather than just open access? And again, then you can get into these discussions about semantics and so on. But let's jump a bit forward from the origins of Godan and the definition of open data to looking at what has happened, what is happening, and what has happened over the last decade or so. So CABI, for example, became one of the hosts of Godan in 2014, and later on was also the host of Godan while there was an implementation of the Godan Action program or project, which was looking at a lot of the engagement around the concept of Godan. But just to illustrate that the host of Godan, or one of the previous hosts of Godan, nowadays is talking about this, still engage around agricultural data, but they're talking more of the FAIR principles, that data has to be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I saw recently announced that they had launched a whole set of teaching materials around this FAIR process framework. So again, looking at the 6 steps that enable you to make your data more accessible, findable, accessible, usable, interoperable, in the world. Not necessarily talking about open data, but we'll see, and we can discuss that later to see what are the differences, what are the options for us to look at, and what is important to us. Is it that the data is defined as open data, or that it is accessible, but maybe with some conditions attached to it? So, okay, here just looking at what, again, I just did a search and said, okay, what are the stages in the implementation of open data? And it gives you a whole set of processes, so which are logical for those who are into data management. But if you tell me as an institution to make my data available as open data, and you tell me, okay, these are the things you have to do, I would feel that it's a bit daunting. So again, do I have to go through all these processes before you can call my data open data? And it's the same approach that happens when you talk about open access publications. What are the criteria and the qualifications for something to be referred to as open? And these are the stages of the process. And then if again you look at what are the main challenges faced by open data projects. Okay, again, this is coming from ChatGPT, but I've rearranged things based on my understanding of what are the major challenges. So you'll find that the legal issues, the funding issues, I've put it right at the bottom. That's the least of our concern today when we're trying to discuss about making data more available, accessible to others. So first is this getting over this concern of privacy and security. People do not want to share their data, or institutions do not want to share their data because they're not, well, it's a matter of trust. They're not sure whether you're able to handle the data properly, especially if it comes to personal data and so on. Again, here, the solution would be about educating people about the types of data, that some data are linked to you as a person, but other data that happen to be around the assets that you manage, whether it is your farm enterprise, your business, what your services you offer. These may not necessarily have to be, well, these can be disconnected from who you are. So it is still something that is important for decision making by other people or by policymakers and so on. And it does not need to, we don't need to know who you are to be able to do that. So the Commonwealth Secretariat talks about user data and content data and distinguishes between these two, saying that most of what we really very often want is the content data, not so much the user data. But for you to be able to initially collect that data, you need to have access to the user data. The second element is about this cultural and organizational resistance. Again, whether it is for institutional ego purposes, whether people, it happened to me once that the Met officers told me that if I give you all the data that I have on, the rainfall data that I've collected for the last 30 years, so what will I do then? And I thought, this is where, you again have to educate that, yes, you are playing a role in terms of providing data as a public good, because there's so many other layers of services that we can build on it. And I think I suppose I still did manage to get access to the data, but it was after getting them to understand that their provision of the data to me enables me to do a lot of value adding, which still recognizes their contribution to the process. So again, it's a matter of education about what does it mean to make your data available, and also what does it mean to give recognition to those who make such data available, and whether it is for free or not. Again, this is where we can discuss a bit more about how do we keep people motivated to share the data. So the technical barriers, it comes back to the technologies, the systems, and what we've seen is that over the years, the technology is getting much better at managing these, and then we'll talk later on about the new era of data management using digital public infrastructure. So the main challenges: privacy, cultural resistance, organizational resistance, technical barriers, technical and technological, the data standardization, again, this harmonization or coherence, as we talked about before, in terms of the way we are presenting the data. And then you get down to the aspects of the quality and the accuracy of the data, because again, it all depends on what is it that you really want to get out of the data. Sometimes it may not mean that you have to have the data on a daily basis. It can be, less regularly collected, but definitely on a regular basis. Then I bring in this element of the user engagement. So what do you do having open data or even making your data accessible? Whether it is you who do it or someone else has to do it, it's about engaging the user with the content, because many of us are not aware of what is available and how well and how much we can make use of it. And then these other elements of timeliness of the data, the funding and resources to be able to either collect the data, make it available, store it, and so on, and even processing it. And then the other issues of legal and licensing issues, which are important. And again, we see that over the years, the policymaker or policymaking has caught up with the technology, and we are now seeing more and more policies and regulations around data protection mechanisms, data commissioners and so on, that ensure that data is being well managed, and there are rules and regulations and ethics that regulate how you can store the data and how you can use it and make it accessible. So these are the challenges that often these open data projects are facing, and that this is, if you want, my hierarchy of challenges in terms of how we should be able to go about addressing them. So now we look at where are we today in terms of understanding about data management, and the difference between 10 years ago and now is that people are realizing, or maybe it's sinking in, that data is a resource. Just like we talk about gold being a resource, it's a natural resource, it's something that belongs to a country. The data about the people, about the citizens of a country are also seen as data. So whether it is country level, institutional level, individual level, or at the level of an asset, because now you can also, using IoT, Internet of Things, you can now have sensors that are looking at picking up data from your different assets, whether it is your greenhouse conditions and so on. At the level of individuals, also nowadays, soon we'll be wearing, we'll have these wearable devices that will even, we can even share information about ourselves, or about our heartbeat rate, about blood, whatever, blood pressure and so on, that are measured, that are being monitored, and can be shared with other people. So data is really seen as the new currency, and therefore people are questioning, so what do we do with this? Is my data worth something? Should I give it away freely, or why should I give it away? And then we've got the things we've seen in the news, the good and the bad use of data. But we've also seen the power of people or being able to use the technologies for concerted actions, empower the people. So, and all this means that just like any resource of a country, there has to be a shift towards responsible use of the resources you own, as an individual, as an institution, as a country, and there has to be this respect of the what do you call that, the sovereignty of data. Now, I'm talking about this in terms of the data, but I wanted to bring us back to the creation of the web. So the web was created, on the basis of an open protocol, HTTP, which we all use now, which has enabled all the things we see on the web today, irrespective of the models. And that concept of the open protocol that enables exchange of data that are located on a computer to be connected to data that is connected on another computer. That was the basis of the origin of the web. Today, we're saying that maybe we're at the point where we're now going to be connecting data, not necessarily on the computer, but the data is about me, that a wearable device is measuring, connected to data somewhere else that is now reading it and using it. So some of the questions I have now is about this whole framework about the data being fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So does fair data, can it not be open? Does fair data have to be free if it's to be open data? Again, so the question of what is the relationship between my data following the fair principles and as opposed to being open data. And then it comes back to the whole process of how do we get started? How do we keep on doing it? What motivates data sharing and exchange? What motivates open data today? And that's the question that Godin, I think, is trying to find out. How do we keep this whole movement around open data going? Do we need to open up to be more open to people who are making their data accessible, and there are conditions attached to it? But if these conditions are not unsurmountable, then is it more important for us to enable people to get access to data? Having said all that, when we look around, I was just thinking about, obviously, we watch YouTube and we watch all these things happening now. I think, the whole world is at the moment, there's an impending overhaul of our financial systems that might happen, whether there's going to be a stock market crash, whether people are going to, move away from the dollar, people are buying gold. We're wondering about how well our democratic systems are going to be working. There might even be, an ecological event that brings us brings us the message that our whole globe, our world is just, very sensitive, whether it is an asteroid that is going to come in 2032 or not. But we need to realize that just like we talk of bubbles, whether we are living in our little bubbles, our network of contacts and so on, but the whole world itself is a bubble in space, and we're stuck in it. So we have to learn to work together for the benefit of the environment, for the benefit of that space or that bubble in space that we live in. So all this is to that we need to prepare ourselves for the future. The future in terms of the physical world, but also the future in terms of the data management world. And I just wanted to talk about a few of the initiatives that I've been engaging with over the last few years, and things like models of collaboration. For example, we all talk of SDGs, but very few people have talked about SDG 17, which to me I feel is all about the partnerships and the collaboration. But we tend to talk of in food and nutrition, we tend to talk of SDG 2 and so on. But I think in the world of in a connected world, SDG 17 is also something we need to pay attention to. And I'm glad to see that Godan actually mentions SDG 17, partnerships and so on, quite strongly in its documents. I've mentioned GFAO, now called GFAIR, which is now talking about collective actions around agricultural research and innovation. Obviously, again, these are all related to agriculture, where they're looking at collective actions. So there's this shift that we need to work more in a collective, in a collective manner. Similarly, you had the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021. We had the evaluation 2 years later in 2023, and now in 2025 there's going to be like the UN Food Systems Summit +4 evaluation of what is happening. And I'm just highlighting some examples that there is a UN Food Systems Transformation Hub, located or facilitated by FAO. The FAO itself has also, in its new strategy, established an Office of Innovation. We've seen in their new strategy that they've got something called Hand in Hand Initiative that is focusing on management of agricultural data around in the member states, the countries, and connected to their system. So again, if you're talking about data management, I think we need to pay attention to what is happening there and even connect with them. Similarly, and I come back to this, this principle of the web that was based on an open protocol, on which, so the web itself was based, or the protocol HTTP was based on this exchange protocol. But since it was introduced, just look at what we've been able to see, how all these big businesses have been able to establish their wealth based on building their services on this open protocol. And this is now a discussion that's ongoing about what we refer to as digital public infrastructure. So again, it's about the public. So again, World Bank has a definition for it from about a couple of years ago. They define DPI as systems, software, or platforms that are foundational digital blocks created for the public benefit. I would interpret it in a longer way to say that it's made up of digital blocks, yes, but created and used for public benefit, and because it's all about the use of it. And then some of the examples of these building blocks that we've read a lot about is blocks on identity. Who are you? We talked about the user before. So we've got the case of this system in India that every citizen in India, so the 1.2 or 1.3 billion people, are all identified by a unique set of, I think it's 11 numbers. And they are using this identity system to enable payments to be made from federal to state to local, municipal, right down to the individual. So basically in India, if you have your ID number, you have a phone number, you have a bank account number that is connected to each other. I don't need to know your phone number. I don't need to know your name. I can just send it. Can I pay this person on this phone number? Just like we see on mobile systems, mobile wallets in Africa. I just send it to the phone number. It will get into your bank account. So they've got this other system called again, this example is coming from India. the UPI Universal Payment Interface, again, which has been quite interesting, quite what do you call it, revolutionary in terms of people getting access to these systems. And then obviously the other building blocks are the data exchange. And again, we have examples from Estonia, X-Road, Gaia is the European model they're using, and then SDMX is what the statistics experts are using as the metadata exchange. But what is important there is in these systems, they have a layer, what they call the consent layer. So every time someone is going to be using your data, you have to have given your consent for them to use it. Either you would have already given it a prior consent so that when they do it, it works for banks and so on. So you only give your consent once, and once you have the system, then they can actually use it. But if it's a new service, then it still comes back to it. So again, it's about this respect of your personal data. Now, DPI is a theme that is being discussed, and it's becoming a term that is more and more popular. I don't know whether because it has the term infrastructure in there, it's easier to sell something called infrastructure to governments. But in the end, it's all about the systems we put in place. Now, the Commonwealth Secretariat has been working on this issue in the field of agriculture and fisheries, and they've come up with this concept called the National Agricultural Data Infrastructure, telling the countries that if you don't try to sort of put some order in the data management within your country, a lot of the data about your citizens are going to be owned by people elsewhere. Multinationals or the Facebooks and the Amazons of today will own enough data about your citizens that in 10 years, they might come and give you advice as a government about what you should be doing. So the concept here is that countries need to ensure that they have control, or they have this oversight of data sovereignty of their citizens. So while they're ensuring data sovereignty, doesn't mean that you keep it to yourself, but you have an oversight of how the data about your citizens are being used, and that this data can also be combined from data being collected both by public and private sector concerns. So I come to the question here. So what are the roles for the youth? And just again, some ideas that come to mind. Oh yes, we talk of, and I'm focusing a lot more on Africa here, that we've heard of the youth dividend, or of the benefits of, is that what they call the double dividend? But obviously Africa is a young continent. We have a lot of youth, so therefore they are the future. I'm just wondering, are we seeing examples of this youth dividend? And if we are not, or if we are seeing part of it, how can we accelerate this process? The second bullet is all about the kind of words we've heard people use about the youth. Youth are innovative, they're entrepreneurial, they're tech savvy, they're environmentally conscious, they're at least definitely more environmentally conscious than the previous generations. They are more educated than the previous generations. They are good advocates, they are able to advocate, whether it is through social media or not, but definitely more vocal today. They are champions of transparency. You know, they are more, let's say, fair and just. I don't know whether it's true or not, because you also have a lot of bullying going on the web today. So the question is, so with all these attributes of the youth today, how do we bring it together at scale to be able to face the challenges of complexity? And I just came across this presentation in the last couple of weeks where people were talking about this domino effect. Very often, I always thought of domino effect. I see dominoes toppling each other one by one, but there's this other realization that a toppling domino is able to topple another domino which is bigger in size, 1.5 times its size, for example. And this little animated GIF there just shows that the impact of something small can be quite large if things are well aligned. And I'll come back to this point later on. So having had all these points that I've made before, that we have a young population. The youth are the future of Africa. We hear that. Africa is poised to be growing economically and so on. So how do we tap into all these assets? And also, how do we organize ourselves as youth? And that's why I thought, okay, just off the top of my mind this morning, I thought, okay, so who are the people we know engaging the youth in the agricultural sector? So we have, obviously, GODAN has been engaging with the youth through, for example, in the, I'm not sure that it was a prototype approach in the YouLead program that was run in some parts of Kenya itself. We know of the YPAD network, Young Professionals in ARD. We know of the CSAYN network, so Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, which has even gone down to connecting with schools, secondary and primary schools, in regards to dealing with climate smart agriculture. We've heard of the youth across linking up with the African Union through the AU-IBA, the AINS network. I also have seen articles about the AU-EU Youth Platform, again, where the EU has a program targeting youth in the African continent. And we also have the International Association of Agricultural Students, which connects all the students in agriculture. So again, we see that the potential is there. There are so many parts of the puzzle, but I think the challenge here is how do the youth help themselves to put this puzzle together and build something quite strong? And I think this is my last slide. So how do we get started? So I think, and this is more about the discussion we should be having. I've not been able to see whether there are any comments in the chat yet, but and I hope the chat is activated for all of us. So this domino effect, as we saw before, you can start small and it can have a greater impact if your action is connected to something else that is able to bring more and more impact. And it's all about the dominoes. As long as the dominoes are well aligned, or we organize ourselves to have the dominoes aligned, a small action from many people can lead to very large actions or impact. But it doesn't mean that putting, somebody said an elephant is not 2,000, is not a big mouse, neither will 2,000 mice make an elephant. So it's about understanding that if we line up the actions, and I'm thinking about data management here. So the data that is collected here, it's processed by someone else. There's a value adding each time. It can lead to something that is very powerful at the end at scale. But we can talk about that later on in terms of the recognition of the value of the contribution of each one of us. And then, so across all these initiatives that we've seen, that by the likes of Gates Foundation, World Bank, the Commonwealth, anyone, it all boils down to dialogue being seen as the best tool to solve problems. And I think this is where I believe GODAN should come back down to the facilitation of dialogues amongst the stakeholders around open data, but also here in the case of youth specifically. And what does dialogue mean? There's a discussion, but again, discussion, just like we're doing today, I've done all the talking so far, but I'm hoping that with the chat and reactions to what I've said, we can then come up with a synthesis of the learnings that come out of this. So each time we do a discussion, we want to be able to synthesize and capture the knowledge we've gained, and not just discuss and each one goes back separately, goes back home with increased knowledge at individual level, but collectively we have not learned something together. Joint discovery, again, and again, this is about learning together or discovering something together. Hopefully my presentation today would have triggered a few of you to discuss things. And again, what do we do following this joint discovery is to lead to new models of collaboration or adopting existing models of collaboration so that we can continue the journey together. Co-learning and peer learning, again, as Kering said, I'm a strong advocate for knowledge management, learning. So it's not learning. Learning is not just about something you do at school. We learn from life, but again, what we learn from life, is something we can share, and peer learning is what enables us then to be able to scale something. So I put scaling locally. So what is the point of learning something, and then so if you don't put it into practice? And again, I think the youth have this great opportunity to be able to share the knowledge they have learned with others around them locally, build that small domino at a local level that can impact at a much larger scale. And then, okay, I cannot end without this bit on knowledge management. It's about capturing, sharing, so that as you share, you are generating new knowledge. Again, it goes back to this co-learning. And each time we understand that we are sharing knowledge for the purpose of building on what is already existing, and to be able to create new knowledge, which is then added to this common knowledge base. But all this, it comes back now down to what is the starting point. The starting point, or the first step in the process, is about measuring data. And that's what Godan is talking about in terms of open data. But again, the measurement of data, the motivation to share the data that has been measured, and receiving recognition for having shared, whether it is raw or processed data. And to me, it's all about, if you had to define the let's say the basic, the protocol around data management, it would be this: someone who's measuring data is motivated to measure, first of all, and to share it. And by sharing it, they're motivated by the recognition they're receiving from their peers for having shared this data. And that is the basic mechanism on which we can build the whole set of data management. So for me, I would say, let's take it from this level, and let's understand that it all starts with this first step, and we can coordinate and plan, and we can even coordinate and plan before we start doing the measurement itself, about what will we do with this data? Who needs the data? What do they need it for? How valuable is that data to you? Now, then we can determine whether do you need to pay me for that data, or I'm glad to share it with you as long as you recognize my role in you achieving the results that you use this data or information for. So to me, that would be my little domino that I'm sort of toppling here. So let's start with this as a measurement of data, and then see how far we can go with it, and how big we can go with it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Believe that was quite insightful. And there is a question that touches on, rather the security of the data. And I think this has actually been one of the biggest concerns in terms of security of the data. And the question is, how safe is our data? Especially about the seed and soil conservation, which is concerned, where there is a fear of losing the endangered seeds and the soil facility in different sites of different of the country.
Okay. Okay, data about seeds and soil conservation. Yeah. Again, it goes back to what are we fearing to lose by giving this data? It goes back to what kind of data you're sharing. And again, about how sensitive the data is, and whoever is using it has to appreciate the sensitivity of the data. But it's like how if I'm, let's see, and this is what I use with farm organizations, says, look, people all want information coming from the farmers, but the farmer does not trust an external organization to pick that information from them. So can a farm organization organize to collect the data and anonymize the data before it's sent to whoever is asking for it? And anonymization is a process, for example, and again, it goes back to how how safe, well, at what point would you feel safe that the data cannot be traced back to you? Is it when I say, okay, I've collected data from 50 people in my neighborhood, and I've averaged the figures, and I'm telling you that for the average person in this neighborhood or in this region, has this kind of seed. Is that useful? That might be useful to someone who's going to use it, but it does not have to be. It does not have to be linked to you personally, but it is a representation of the availability somewhere. So I'm not sure whether this thing about the endangered seeds. I would have said that if there's something that is endangered, the fact that it is available might even be, might be a signal that this is something we need to conserve. Therefore, we need to now talk about whether we can multiply these and use it elsewhere. In terms of the soil fertility, again, it goes back to who is looking for the data, who's going to use it. Is it someone who's going to help you achieve greater soil fertility, or is it someone who's going to sell you their inputs, or is it someone who's going to help you find mechanisms where you can improve the soil fertility by yourself? So again, we can question the person who's looking for the data to say, what are you going to do with that? Why do you want it? What is it for? And you can say, I would only want to subscribe to those users that make sense to me, that obviously adds value to me. Why would I want to share it if I'm just giving it away and I'm not getting anything in return? So, that's why I said we can do a lot of planning and negotiation before we even share, so that there's an agreement about, if I'm sharing this with you, it's only with the intention that you will use it in this way and no other way. And if you decide to use that information in a different way, you need to come back to me to be able to ask for my permission again. And that's where, the technology nowadays allows us to do this consent layer. So you can give consent for certain specific use cases and not for a generic use.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We have a question on how then, especially, can people be involved in, I think that the data management as either a community leader or as a farmer. So right at the grassroots level, how can they involved? So I'm a farmer, how can I be involved in data management, either in terms of data collection, sharing the data, or also, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let me take an example I worked on last year. I worked with the Pan-African Farmers Organization, where they wanted to establish a directory of farmer organizations across Africa. And you would think, surely this data must be available. But the Pan-African Farmers Organization works with the principle of subsidiarity, that they are working with the regional organizations. So the SACAO, the IAFs, and so on, who now talk to their national federations. And within the country, there are federations of organizations. So we came up with a model of data collection about the farm organizations and their members, right? So that, or the membership. No, I will not say members, the membership. So because a lot of donors want to know, okay, if you as PAFO, you represent the African farmers. So how do I know you are really representing all these farmers? So they wanted to have this kind of database to share. So it's not even a database that I need to show that as a Pan-African farmer organization, I'm in touch with so many regional organizations. These regional organizations are in touch with so many national federations, and these federations are in touch with so many local farmer associations who have a certain number of members. That in itself would be a very strong signal about how powerful the farming community of farmers are in Africa. But we failed to get the data. And we said, we're not asking for who the individual farmer is, but I just need to know how many of them do you have? How many members do you have? We also tried to ask how many of them are men, women, how many are youth? And again, it goes back to, if the youth want to be represented in different conversations, you don't wait for a high-level panel to happen and you get a few people invited who are representing you, of course, but it's the power of the numbers that make you more what do you call that? Not powerful. There's a different word for it, but you are able to then have more clout to be able to say we have a voice that represents so many people coming from this kind of spread and so on. So for me, my message is that all of us can be involved in data management at different levels. Think of where you are. Well, are you active at the local level? Are you active at the district level or national level? You need to start thinking about what can I bring back to my community if I'm sharing information about their status. So I don't have to talk about the status of individuals, but I take like the demographics of the people I represent. So it's the gender distribution, it's the what kind of crops we are growing, what kind of value chains are we involved in, and so on. And that allows people to come in and say, okay, we're able to provide these services, or whether it is donors, they can target specific communities. That's what donors are doing now. So if I take the example of Kenya itself, I understand you've gone for this kind of decentralized version model of to counties. So we see a lot of projects happening in counties in Kenya rather than happening in a region. So I don't know, maybe that's the change that has happened. But from all the literatures I see now is that, okay, there are interventions happening by international donors, but they're targeting very specific counties in Kenya. So my question is, so how is Kenya learning from the experiences of different counties to share the knowledge across the whole country? That is something of national concern. So yes, we can allow the donors to come in and intervene in different regions, but the counterpart should be that the lessons learned here should be shareable across to the other counties with similar conditions. We don't want to repeat a prototype over and over again. You've done one prototype. Let's look at how we can scale it by sharing this knowledge. And that goes back to this whole thing about data management, accessible, and being transparent. So Robert has this question, I can see. I think Robert is qualified well enough to answer the question himself. Long time no hear of it, or at least we have not interacted.
Yeah, but I think it is necessary for his questioning because there are many people who may be interested in getting to know whether open data can be leveraged to drive transparency, innovation, and inclusive development while addressing the issues of concerns. And maybe one of the challenges that we are having is what Christian asked, do we have the data in the first place? And one of the biggest challenges that Gordon had after creating the awareness that there is some space for open data, we realized, just like he did when he was doing the Africa cooperative dimension, that we actually don't have the data that we think we do have. So the issue that we therefore have to address, and that is what Gordon is doing at the moment, is creating a repository of data across countries. And we have an initiative that we are calling the SDG Pavilion that is capturing data across all various SDGs that a country is having. And we are challenging champions in their own country to set up the pavilion with support from Gordon and the partners that we are putting together so that we can have that data. And the principles of fairness in the data sharing will actually be made beneficial, and we will actually be able to address issues of privacy when we anonymize the data, because openness of data also comes with the requirement that make the data available, but not the whole data set as associated with an object, but rather make it usable for innovation, but not this whole data that says This data is about Robert Kibaya. He is actually aged at this. He lives in this location. We don't want personal data being shared, but anonymized data that you remove all the personal element and make the data useful, so that, available, so that the persons who may have it for use don't have to know that they are dealing with a person called who or with what ID number. And again, the other question that is coming also is from Professor Ruth Onyango, who is asking the opportunities in job creation for the large number of youths that are trained in data management. And yes, again, when we discuss about having the pavilion, the issue is, it is us now to make data a marketable product, that people can know that you have this availability of data, so that they can create knowledge products out of it. In the earlier life of Christian, he actually had a very nice schema that was showing that if you have data, if you process it, you get information. If you have information, if you integrate it, you'll actually get, you synthesize it, you'll get knowledge. And if you have knowledge that is synthesized, you get wisdom. And I remember that discussion in many of the forums where I've actually been involved in discussing how does then that wisdom help others. And this is now what we are saying, that if you have data, the potential for you to have products that are knowledge driven is very high. And that is what the Golden 2 agenda that we actually are now set out to address is looking at. So we will be engaging with people, and we are inviting individuals from various regions. That Golden doesn't belong to anyone. It's an organization for sharing open data. We are at the moment having spaces for storing data, for accessibility. And we have platforms that have been created for that, so that countries can embrace that and use it. So we will be discussing in forthcoming forums on that agenda. And we'll be calling people who have a specialism in various knowledge domains, so that they can talk to us. So if you think that you have some knowledge set that you want to share, that you think will intrigue the community of data users globally, do get in touch with ourselves, and then we can actually engage further. I wanted to respond that way to Robert, because Robert is definitely not a person who is new to open data. But we definitely need to make sure that the data we are talking about is not wholesome data. It is data that has been anonymized and ready for use by others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see we are on top of the hour. Ready to close.
Can I just launch something? Am I being too naive at this age to say that if we have all these countries that have been working on agricultural data management or data collection, why is it that today we still find that countries are having to reinvent the wheel? Should we not already be having a kind of a directory or encyclopedia of the users of data? So if somebody is collecting data X, how can that be used, or who are going to be the ones who will use this data X for to add value somewhere else? Somehow, I have not seen anyone documenting these kinds of, let's say, whether it is an algorithm or whether it is it's the use of data, so that I can say, okay, yes, this now demonstrates the value of collecting data X. And if we had discussions around these, we would already set up the structure of how data, if it's collected, is going to be available and used by others. We have today protocols, and I've been reading about this thing called Beacon protocol, which allows, allowing multiple services to come together and offer a service to a user. But they've looked at it from the angle of a provision of service. I would have wanted to see this same protocol being used in a reverse manner to say, we have a set of standards for data exchange. Whoever has data, can you put a sample of your data through this protocol to check that your data actually responds or answers to the demand for this kind of standards. Therefore, your data is valuable to a whole lot of people. I would have loved to see this kind of discussion, maybe in a different session, or maybe even we can have a working session organized by GODAN, where people are now having these conversations, and we take it in a modular form. We all talk about the data on the farm size. What does the farm size in itself, what can it represent to a whole lot of stakeholders? And then do these kind of things. Similarly with farmer profiles, there's the countless number of times we've seen people who are saying, oh, we're establishing a directory of farmers, and therefore we have to collect information about the farmer in terms of the profiles. How come after all these years we haven't come up with a standard that is answering a lot of these questions? So this is the kind of feedback I would love to hear from people, not this time, but maybe later, next time we meet, and we can have this kind of discussions. Thanks, Derek.
I know we are pressed on time, but I have to ask one question, which the youths will hate me if I don't ask. Is then how do, with all this knowledge, how then do we know the biggest problem with the youth is in unemployment? So youth unemployment is quite a big issue. So how do they convert the different areas and the different segments that we have highlighted today to become job opportunities for them? And I will direct this both to you, Dr. Kirsch, and also to Dr. Kiringai, as we sum up the session. Thank you.
Okay, I will just answer. I don't have the answer to it, but I will say it would be similar to how do we create opportunities within a value chain. If we understand how data is processed into information, and primary information is processed into secondary information and used by different people. In fact, we could even think of, again, it goes back to having a discussion as, if I collect the data today and I submit it to a database, what is this? Even if it is worth one, I don't know, we'll call it a 1 unit, it could be a digital currency unit, 1 unit. So for each transaction that is happening, there's an acknowledgement that if somebody uses the data downstream, and they're paying for it, then they have to share that cost, the income from that information, right down across to the people who now contributed to it. So it's a bit like blockchain methodology being applied to the processing of data. And in that way, we might find that the youth who are at different levels, operating at different levels, could find, it's like it's a bit like the, what do you call it? The what is this economy they call it? Where you do different things. I forgot the term now. So it would be it would not be a job, but it would be a way of generating an income. It might be at small increments, but it's actually empowering us to know that whatever we're spending our time and effort on is worth something. It will come back to us. Okay. But that's still the theory. Let's see whether it will work.
And maybe the theory is backed by reality in some countries. India is the hub for the world in terms of providing just information associated with what somebody has learned and can manipulate some data around. But the data is made available to them. If you were to develop an algorithm to actually create some knowledge piece that is going to be used by a government, that is a product that is yours. It doesn't belong to the owner of the data. You will only have a demonstration that you are showing them. Here you are. I use this data to achieve this in this setup. In your own setup, you can also achieve much better if you do this. What I'm trying to say, therefore, is if you are a youth that is knowledgeable in data management and data manipulation, or what you call data science, then you have the potential to create data products or knowledge products that are derived from an algorithm that you have developed. So that algorithm that you have developed is advised by the data source that you have. So by having the knowledge that you have this open data available to you, the potential for you to create a new knowledge product associated with that is very high. And we can give an example, and I think we will actually be sharing in due course, that we have what we are calling food systems operating system. And what we are trying to do is make data available in every set of engagement with the food system, so that somebody who has a desire to actually do more research or analysis on data that has been already collected, they will be able to achieve that because they have knowledge that the data is going to be available somewhere. And then the question that will be coming is, who is contributing that data? Is it going to be free? And those are the issues that, as Christian says, we'll actually be discussing as we go forward. But there are many issues to be discussed around this. Opportunities are there. We will be having, and I want to share this to the youth that may be here, that we are going to be creating an incubator innovation initiative within Gordon that is going to be making competition through hackathons. People share what products they can create. You will use the little data that you have, and in the process, you'll actually be able to create products that can be shared with others. We also have, for the sake of Prof. Onyango, the youth action in resilient agri-food systems agenda that is being that is interpreting the agenda of the action, the Kampala Declaration and Plan of Action. And we are trying to say that if you are in your own locality, there are some things you can do and bring to the surface, and we will be able to market that for you with the governments in your own region, or with other users who may be of interest, or even with universities. And we'll be having mentors based at universities working with the youth for that purpose. So I want to say that Derek will be reminding us that we have overshot our time, but I want to say that this is just the beginning. And you can agree with me that we have resourceful people like Christian, who are working with many organizations. When they want data analyzed or an issue analyzed around some data piece or a data set, one of the things that they will be saying is, do you have an experienced young person in this data processing issue that I need an urgent result, and a job comes from there. So there are opportunities, but your knowledge set has to be made available and open. And I am sure Derek will actually be creating a portal where expertise is going to be harnessed by those who need it. And then people will know that we are the source of that, and it will be you to provide that knowledge set to the others. I want to add there, because this can actually get to be a lecture in knowledge management, and we don't want to do that at this time. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Christian. We definitely could not have invited somebody better to actually give us an understanding of where Gordon came from, how knowledge management integrates to data, and how we are integrating this to policy issues within organizations that are advising the world, like FAO and others. We definitely have a lot of resourceful people here, and I want to return the control back to Derek so that he can. But I needed to say this for everyone. We now have only 3 regions. We have Derek representing Europe, which is inordinate. Europe should have its own hub. We have a hub in North America. and it is driven by somebody who most likely is still asleep. And maybe we actually need to factor them in our future discussions. Dhairia, and we have Abhinav, who is actually in charge of Asia. So we have so many regions, and we want to go to the pavilion level where we are discussing country levels. So we want to be able to drive this with you. So let us know what you can do for your country. We are ready to discuss with you what we have and share the concepts of what we want country pavilions to do, so that we can all become contributors to the discussions that we'll be sharing going forward. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll have to put a hard stop at that point. But the challenge here is we need to have a TikTok for data, where the more views you get on your data, the more usage you get on your data, the more you earn. That's quite an interesting perspective. We have a question that will form the basis of the next question in terms of the opportunity, the job opportunity, and the creation of the job opportunities along the data space, and how this data can be used to answer the question of youth unemployment. This has been quite an interesting journey. This has been, talk. This has been quite an interesting, and also raising the question, ask people to ask the right questions. And I don't want to go further than that. So thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you for creating time to join this discussion. Thank you, Christian, for the amazing conversation that you have spurred, and everyone who has asked questions and feel there's something more we can do to create a data space that would answer the question on youth unemployment. Thank you, and have a good morning, evening, and also night for everyone. Bye.